it's not available, I don't even bother
Really?
looking. I see that attitude and I'm like, yeah, like, I'm like a proselytizer for
Yeah.
housing. Oh, no, you
I
need
saw
to
you,
look into.
you posted the,
Oh, yeah, sure, that,
That's
yeah,
good.
that, you know, it's just, there's this, I think now there's this. I don't even bother looking. I'm like, no, you're like, you work at USU, you should, you know,
yeah,
get a place. But somehow, like cracking that mentality or something, how do you do that?
Chat later.
Hey, there's stuff coming online, like, not only yours, there's 250.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the June 12th, 2023 meeting of the Planning Commission to order at 4:39. And the first thing is citizens to be heard. So do we have any citizens who want to be heard? Anybody to speak on a topic that's not part of our hearing today? I'm going to guess not, but if you want to, just go ahead and speak up. Okay. Next question, any ex parte communications and disclosures that anybody wants to make? Okay, hearing none.
Yes, we're doing the public hearing on the MFR 45 stuff.
No, that's,
No.
we're just reviewing the MFR
Oh,
45.
okay,
The public hearing is on the PUD amendment,
okay.
yeah, for
Yeah,
density bonus.
okay, okay. I guess I talked to the owner of the MFR 45 place, Scott McFarland, about that project. I don't know, I'll just disclose that.
So, yeah.
And next item, approval of the minutes. Minutes when I wasn't here.
I motion to approve the minutes.
Did you make the motion? Yeah,
Yes,
second.
you did make a motion.
yeah, that's what I just said, yeah.
Yes. Okay, any comments on the minutes?
I would just comment, just a slight typo on page 5 of the packet under public hearing timestamp 9:40. It says Maderfield. I think I should say Manderfield,
Oh,
MANDER.
My name's also Barley somewhere in there, but
I got that.
Awesome.
Anyone else? Okay, so we're voting on the amended minutes at this point. All in favor? Looks unanimous. Okay, I guess we're ready for presentations. County Commissioner not here, I think is the first presentation. So if Trish shows up, we'll have her on next, I guess, and the update on the HDHO potential revisions and a debrief of the June 6th Commission workshop.
All right. Actually, can I see that agenda?
You can, I'm gonna give you this one.
I need to reference it. Okay, so at our commission meeting on June 6th, we had a workshop on the HGHO potential revisions. And a discussion around basically a debrief kind of on the workshop from the previous month, or actually it was in late April. We had the joint workshop, which we did a debrief here for the planning commission, but I hadn't done that for the commission yet. So we kind of just previewed some of the outcomes of that joint workshop. And then we went through and discussed the status of all the HGHO projects and where they're at, and kind of looking at where each of the units are, or the developments are, in terms of their construction, build out, and whether or not they've made it on the real estate market, and some of that research that we put together. So I guess I wanted to just kind of go over some of that new information with this body too, to update on the information that we've been gathering. So I'm going to just share my screen with the I think we have to share
It should be
probably.
enough, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so I believe this is in your packet. Yes, it is. If it was the revised packet, I did put this in there. But, so this kind of shows you that we have 59 units out of 312 total units, that's restricted and non-restricted, that are either built or under construction. And then 24 of the 59 have either been sold or are under contract. And then 12 of the units have been retained by the developer. So there's 8 of those in the Peakview subdivision and 1 in Murphy Flats. And then, yeah, so I think that's, let's see. And then there's another one too that was doing that where they retained, oh, there's 3 in the Hawk subdivision. So anyway, so there's about 12 units that have been retained by the developer, but are being rented out to actively employed households. And then, let's see, so that leaves 23 units unsold of the ones that have been, that are either kind of out there on pre-sale or have already been constructed. And so when I was looking at the listings on the real estate, like on, you know, different sites like Zillow and Realtor.com, not all 23 of those are listed out on the market right now. So that's just something to note. And there's various reasons, I'm sure, why they're not listed. But overall, I would say, you know, when you look at the other side of that spreadsheet, you see that there's 253 of the units that have not gotten to the point of even breaking ground. And so what we're looking at, what the commission kind of wanted to know a little bit more on the details of what's taking so long for all of these other developments. And I mean, really, it's going to be, we're going to be working on that, but it's kind of, we know the answers already. They're all at various stages of different random things that happened through the life of these projects, whether it was related to the litigation or, you know, where they had a developer who they sold the project to a different developer and then they kind of redesigned the whole project and had to go through their civil review again. Or one of the other projects just took forever to finalize getting their construction and getting their bond submitted. But at this stage, they're all really close to the point where they would be either putting in their public improvements and starting to break ground and all of that. So the Peakview project is the one that's on the commission's next meeting for their extended final plat. And so that there's still 80 units in those phases that would be going in, and so that they're going to get their final decision at the next commission meeting whether or not they can move forward. So they're all kind of like really close to the finish line of getting there, but kind of all at different stages. And we did a little bit of digging into the different purchase prices and what they're listed for on the market right now. And there's kind of a range of prices there, but you can kind of look at those, and some of them are older, like the Starbucks subdivision that was from back in 2021, I think, when that one sold. So the prices are definitely different now. But for the Peakview, for example, phase 1, those units are, they're all single family, the ones that sold. The duplexes are the ones that they held on to and are renting out. So, but the listing price for first purchase price for those units in phase 1 went from anywhere from 359,000 all the way up to 520,000, which is like the more recent ones. And so there's quite a bit of a range there. But yeah, does anybody have any questions on this information?
Yeah, on the price per square foot,
Mhm.
on like Murphy Flats and Peakview, is the first number the is that like the unrestricted versus restricted
No, the orange highlighted rows are all for the restricted units.
Okay,
And then the up above, the like light purple is the unrestricted units.
because what I, I was like, oh, how much do you save per square foot,
Mhm.
on that? Because they could be different sizes. I was like really
Yeah.
curious on the
Well, there is-
effectiveness.
The way that they have it set right now for their prices, the one that is listed on the market right now that's according to the latest update I got from them is that one, let's see. Yes, so 338 thousand and 406 to up to 461,000. That's the price range. I didn't do the breakout for the price per square foot, but you could imagine that it would be higher for sure.
It's about a 30% discount for
Yep.
restricted.
Yeah,
That's what it is, yeah,
We don't
right,
know.
because that's what Courtney, I think, even said straight up that it was gonna be a 30% difference. So that's what they're shooting for anyway, which is,
That's
yet
roughly
to be
what it
seen
is.
in terms of what it actually goes for
30% difference.
for 7 of those units.
And do you think that, it seemed to be a point of contention with the commission. If you were to be like, all right, we're taking 300 more applications, do you think that would be filled up or not?
You think that developers would apply for
Yeah.
for that incentive?
Because it seems to be like it's taken long because no one wanted to do it, and then there's it's taken long because of COVID and stuff, and I was like, what is the truth? I kind of was like, that was an interesting point I saw between them. I was like, it seems like two different very viewpoints of that.
Mhm, there definitely was, yeah, there was some divergence there. I don't really know. I don't know
Maybe
how to
Steve
fix
can
that.
help us on this in the sense of, if they don't want to do it, am I right? They can just back out at this point and say, I'm not going to do it, just to pencil out now.
Right.
They've maybe already put some money into it, but I guess we take that decision on, I put money into it, but it's not penciling out.
Right,
Well, one other issue is the interest rates are going up, so the cost of financing is certainly gonna have an impact.
I would say, just given my experience, if to answer your question, if more of these HDHO units were out there for the taking, and given, I would say probably the only people that would be interested would be a multifamily or apartment developer, because then anybody can own it, so you can leverage the wealth that's necessary to do this at a scale that you can make it pencil. Single family homes, I don't think, it's just not it's just it's too risky, essentially. Like, it just doesn't pencil well enough.
The risk is you can't get enough density to cover the restricted market. What's the risk is oh, I'm gonna buy this, but I don't know if it'll get the upzone, when people say risk, I'm just kind of
Creating a product that there's a market for, so
Right.
so just the cost of construction alone for a single family house, there's not enough for people that are employed in Grand County. There's not enough people that make enough money to afford
Right.
just the cost of building
Right.
with a little bit of profit, right? Because,
Right.
developers should not be,
Yeah.
expected to do this for free or pennies.
So you're saying our target needs to be what we need to be okay, your median wage in Grand County is this, so we need to build things 350 and below. And that just doesn't apply to the single family model.
Yeah, you just can't do that. And labor is a big part of that. You just can't get labor in this town. And so you have to pay a premium on top of the rising cost of everything
Right.
else. And so,
So you don't think there'd be any bites more on on a single family style HDHO? Basically.
in the way that the ordinance is currently written, no.
Okay.
There might be somebody that could crack it, but given my personal experience doing it and others I know in the state, we're like, no way, stay the hell away.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
no,
touch it with a 10-foot
I've
pole.
talked to a couple other developers that
Yeah.
were oh, we're you know, kind of the same attitude. And then I'm like, but we did fill 300 units, but is it all buyer's regret? You know, or something.
Yeah.
What
We're,
about-
we're in it.
I mean,
We've passed the point of no return.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Oh, yeah.
and
you
it's a
are,
little bit,
especially-
it's a little bit tongue in cheek. and,
Right,
You know, and.
but you're
case-
doing a
case
little
in point
different
is
than
in-
single family. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I heard too on the county commission's public hearing for Peakview, you know, with that change, so all of the developers were told that anybody can own these units so long as the occupant, and this is, you know, indisputable, this is what we were told, this is what we thought the ordinance was, and that's the whole basis of the litigation was that it's, some are saying that, no, that's not it, the owners must also.
Oh, yeah, no, I followed that.
And so Peakview had to, why, one of their large delays was that they had to entirely change the product that they had, like what was the one style of home, they had duplexes.
Duplexes, yeah.
And so they had to completely change their master plan because that's not a product that
Right.
people want.
And so where we stand, like, that was one of the things that the commission was viewing on that. What was their take on changing? Were they into changing that definition? Like, right now,
The
you can be,
ownership,
you can be approved ownership. And then you can move, like, let's say I bought a place, then you move away. I can still rent it out to somebody that's locally,
yeah, you can do
but
that
the
currently.
initial person has to be approved.
Right, has to
Okay.
qualify as a
Yeah.
active employee household. And so, well, let me get
Oh,
through
I'm sorry,
a
I
little
thought you
bit
were
more,
done.
and then we'll
Yeah.
get to that part. So, so the conversation kind of went from thinking about this and kind of just going through the numbers here. And then the next kind of phase of the workshop was looking at, they wanted to have this kind of discussion on what the original intent of the HCHO was. And since I wasn't around during that time, I just kind of opened it up to the commission, and I asked if there are other participants in the audience would want to provide any input as well. But basically, it just kind of went around the commissioners, and they gave their perspective on what they thought the original intent was. So, like, for example, Commissioner McGann said that it was to find a path forward for people who live and work in Grand County to buy a home, to affect the home prices, at the same time protect neighborhoods, and not for low-income housing, but for those who wouldn't qualify for low-income housing programs. Commissioner Walker described it as that the market would decide between ownership and rental opportunities, and that the HCHO was intended to mitigate demand for second homes, driving up prices. And it wasn't going to target everybody, but it was targeting workforce. And Commissioner Clapper said, it was developed as a workforce housing program to support local business needs for employee housing, challenging to get public buy-in. And the process to decide on the mapping was very challenging and time consuming. The incentive of providing workforce housing helped the community to support the program in the end. The fact that it was a program that would provide housing for workforce was like a positive thing in the end. And then he also remarked that it was to eliminate outside forces competing for housing. Commissioner Winfield described the program in his current perspective as being very strict and therefore not very popular, and that it's very slow moving. Maybe that wasn't the original intent, of course, but that was his comment about it. And then Planning Commissioner OB here was in it, participating in the discussion, and just kind of reiterated that it's not an affordable housing program, and it wasn't meant to serve seasonal workers, but it was targeted towards workforce in general, and that it was strict for a reason. So those were all of the remarks that I wrote down during the workshop. And then we got into the phase of looking at the individual eligibility requirements that we were kind of bringing up at the previous workshop to look at. And we kind of went through and said, okay, which one of these kind of is the low hanging fruit? And I think Jacques just kind of led the discussion on selecting some of the eligibility requirements that they thought they all might have consensus on, or that stuck out the most to revise. And so we went through, and I think Kevin brought up a couple, and then they straw poll vote on some of those. We didn't get through the whole list though. So the ones that we did get consensus on, for the most part, not all majority of the commissioners voted this way, but the majority of them were in agreement to remove the requirement for developers and investors who are building the project to be qualified as an AEH. And then there was also consensus on expanding eligibility to the full 84532 zip code, so that it would go down to San Juan County and Spanish Valley. And then also removing the ownership restriction for multifamily apartment developments where units are not sold individually but are rental units. Those units would remain restricted for occupancy, but the developer, owner, manager of an apartment complex would not have to be a Grand County entity or qualify as AEH, which right now the code seems to imply that they would have to be qualified. So those were the three that we got through that seemed to have the most consensus to go ahead and revise. And then the ones that we didn't get around to were talking about the ADUs and whether or not those were intended to be restricted as well for AEH, or if they just should be kind of let alone, you know, like they really just kind of exist to serve local housing anyway. They're not allowed to be nightly rentals. So kind of, I just described that logic, but we didn't get around to voting on it. So that one will be brought up at the next workshop. And then all the other ones too. So the removing the ownership requirement altogether, that's one of the ones on the list. And then the other two, like specific eligibility requirements that were that came out of the workshop and a lot of the public comments were looking at whether or not we should change anything to do with the self-employed working out of their home requirement to have more than 75% local clients. So at the workshop, some participants wrote down a modification to that to say we should lower the percentage to 50%, or there should be no percentage requirement, but minimum 3 years of taxes paid in the Grand County or San Juan County. And then that was the same for the remote worker employed by a company serving more than 75% local clients. There were suggestions to lower that percentage or remove the percentage. I would say that one was less popular at the workshop, but the self-employed one was more, seemed to have more kind of interest. So those were the ones that we kind of pulled from the original joint workshop and that we were trying to get more input on at the county commission on June 6th.
I think our discussions here on those ones that there was consensus with the commission tended to go along those lines too. So that's good. We had decent alignment with this commission.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm glad to see there was some progress.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a big step forward just to even be talking about this. So yeah, it's
I
good.
agree.
I think there's some tweaks that could be made that would go a long ways, and it might not have to be like all of the big changes, but we could look at those too. And but I think just keep the discussion going. So at the June 20th commission meeting, we're going to have another workshop up ahead of the regular meeting, and we'll go through the rest of those topics. Yeah, and then after that, as far as next steps, once we have clear direction on all of these potential revisions, we would, you know, draft the land use code amendments, put that through legal review, and then of course there would be 2 public hearings, one here, planning commission, and then one at county commission for that land use code amendment. So that's what I have on that, on the HDHO.
Thank you.
Anybody have any comments or questions?
One of the questions I have is, so we're, you know, the time period is done with the HDHO. So we're kind of tweaking these things to bring it back. Like what's the commission? Are we like, okay, is this part of our larger thing about like, okay, this is gonna be like a countywide thing?
I don't know about that. I mean, I realize like some of the, like the one about, it's a little late in the game to try to be fixing the requirement for the developer investor
Right.
to not have to be qualified, but
It just seems like the intent is like, oh, are we gonna do more of this? Like, is there any talk about? you
I
know,
haven't heard anything like that.
Okay.
The intention to expand it. I think now we've been moving on, with our, looking at addressing the need for true multifamily. That's why we're doing
Right.
all the multifamily stuff in the future land use plan. And so I think that's where we're gonna get a lot more of the seasonal housing and
Mhm.
employee housing for those that would not qualify for HGHO. Or wouldn't qualify for HGHO or be able to afford those units.
I really wanted to comment to the commission too, when they were saying about the history of that. Real estate was like twice as inexpensive. I mean, it's doubled twice,
I
so.
know,
But that was like a major piece of the puzzle
that is.
that I was like, yeah, but,
Mhm.
it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
Through no fault of,
Right.
county policies. I'm like, this just shows the demand for this kind of thing. Anyways, that was my 2 cents on that.
There's so many factors that play into
Yeah.
this for sure. Did you have anything to say?
Tony has his hand up.
Oh, Tony, go ahead. You're
Can't
still
hear ya.
muted.
I was just saying, I'm sorry I'm online, so I'm gonna try to be concise, but like, when I saw this spreadsheet, I had one question, and I wasn't around when HDHO was made, so this is context building for me. But when we did ADOs, I know that we had a quota or limit. I believe the number was 300 in like a trial program. Like how many of these we expect to come online, or at least a volume that we're willing to absorb. Does the HDHO program have the same kind of like, this is how many units we'll think we'll get out of this program? Because it's, sorry, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to interrupt someone else, but
No, I'm interrupting. Sorry.
it seems to me that there are a lot of extremely low volume developments in a high density program. And I understand that there's an inherent difference in the real world, but when I see 4 and 2 units being developed in a high density program, I'm wondering like, how small is the lot? Where are the programs that look like Viewgate Terrace with 122 units? Why aren't those things happening? I ask leading questions. We simply don't have enough real estate to make this program work. But I'm trying to start that conversation. We got a heck of a lot of 2-unit, 4-unit high density developments. That's a fun number to think about.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that they intended or had thought that there were gonna be applications that came in for that low number. And I just don't think they anticipated it, so they probably didn't write anything into the code to make some kind of threshold or,
Right.
Minimum number of units that could qualify for HDHO as a development application. So I don't know, yeah, it is kind of funny to think about that, but as far as the unit cap there, the HDHO unit cap was 300, and whereas the ADO ended up being capped at 150.
Okay. Thank you for the correction on my numbers. I'll note that.
Okay.
And the biggest of the HDHO, I couldn't see, how big is that? It's a pretty big
The
project.
Viewgate Terrace apartment building or development is 122 units.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a big one for sure. And that one is, they're getting, I think they're just finalizing their building permits now, so.
Any other questions? Why, look, next up is Lisa, for the MFR 45.
All right. Okay, so yeah, as you guys will remember, at our May 22nd meeting, the planning commission reviewed the land use code amendment to establish the MFR 45 density bonus district. And that was given a favorable recommendation by the planning commission to move forward. So where that's at right now, it's still with the attorney's office in legal review, and we're hoping that it will be wrapped up in time to be on the June 20th commission's meeting as a public hearing. It has been noticed that way, so I'm kind of shooting for that, but just kind of dependent on, I know the attorney's office is under a lot of pressure because they lost some staff, so things are not going as fast there. But this is the follow-up land use code amendment to that, and this would establish the actual development standards. And so with this type of development that we'd be approving through this zoning district, it's all going to be multifamily rental type units. It's not going to be anything that would be sold individually. So the development standards, the process that you would go through as a property owner, you would go through the rezone request to get the MFR 45 use and development, or sorry, use district. And then you would go through a site plan review for the actual building of the units. And that's where all of these standards would come into play at site plan. So right now, the way that this is set up is kind of, I borrowed some of the standards that were already in the land use code, and then I also borrowed some from the HDHO program. So like, for instance, multifamily structures shall be located no closer than 20 feet from any other structure except for on-site accessory structures. Site features shall be designed to ensure compatibility between on-site residential and non-residential uses and surrounding neighborhood and land uses. And there's the requirement for internal sidewalks and screening. And then in terms of building height, oh, sorry, I should talk about the parking requirement first. So within this density bonus, there's also an incentive to get the affordable housing units. The other incentive that's provided here is a parking reduction. So when I presented these to the commission at some point, it was last month, I think, this was probably the one thing that they were kind of more concerned about, is whether or not this big of a parking reduction is would be successful, and or if it would cause any problems. And so I've been tasked, and I'm still in the process of doing some research, other communities that have done parking reductions, and kind of figuring out whether or not there's been any problems with those, or if they're mostly success stories. So that is something that I'm looking at currently. But the idea with the parking reduction is that we're locating these districts on the future land use map close to town and close to job centers, so they should be able to have more walkability and connectivity to, not have to have so many cars and rely on cars.
Yeah, because in theory, they could use the MAT if that keeps going.
That's true. And there's, they
Like
do
you
have
could
that
set up
now.
a stop and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and that's awesome. So the fact that we have a little public transit system in place is gonna help that for sure. In the Article 5 standards, for lot design standards, we're providing the incentive to is also going to be for the building height. So building height would be up to 45 feet. And I did note in my presentation to the commission on this, that we actually already have this in the land use code for the HDHO 35B. That Bugate Terrace project is under that zoning. And in our code already, we do allow buildings to go up to 45 feet, but we have never been able to approve that during site plan because of the fire department's equipment limitations. So that is something that would still, if they can get that worked out, which I know there's some efforts underway to upgrade the equipment. If that can happen in time for this project, then they could maybe be able to get approved with that height. But otherwise it would have to go, back down to 30 or 35 or 40. I think the last time Brandon weighed in on that, he said that they tested their trucks and they could go up to 40 feet in the right circumstances. So those are the main development and use standards that we've got so far. This will probably change a little in terms of adding some more different standards that, you know, as we do some more research, but the biggest things are the building height increase and the parking reduction. Anybody have any comments or input on that? Thoughts?
I'm just excited to hear what you learn, reaching out or learning from other communities on parking, because
Yeah,
it is, I mean, it's such an issue, and it's just, you know, just the way our country has expanded, it's just backed us into this corner where,
yeah,
gosh, the price that you have to pay to park a car,
right.
your house for your car.
Mhm. I know,
It's-
it's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
so hopefully I'm sure there's some great solutions out there.
Yeah, there's so many areas that are doing this now where they're just getting rid of a lot of the parking requirements altogether. But I mean,
Yeah, this,
different places can do that too, where they have more transit and walkability and stuff.
this area, which they're targeting, has absolutely horrible access by bicycle.
Yeah, you're right,
I-
across the
I
highway.
was on trail mix for a long time, and this was,
Yeah,
that area is like, there's some roads in the back. You have to basically go on an expert level single track, kind of like
Oh,
commute
right.
to town.
right.
You're trying to
Yeah.
cross 191.
Yeah, that is a
I know
concern
that
for
people
sure.
in Moab, you know, we double up, we live packed, you know, you get a partner just so you can afford rent, kind of thing. You're gonna have two cars, you
Right.
know? And unfortunately, I go in some of our more higher density neighborhoods, and it's like, it's bad.
Yeah.
I am all in for, you know, density and housing, but I feel like there needs to be a thing where it's like, yeah, we are committing to like a paved bike path into town or
Right.
something like,
Yeah,
you know,
agree.
I like this project, but that's my only cutting back on the parking. It's like, I don't know, developers, you gotta build some kind of parking structure, but
right.
I feel that taking the parking out on the rest of everybody else is in those neighborhoods, like, that neighborhood has a lot of people that actually live here that I don't think are gonna be happy about 1,000 cars being on their streets,
Right.
so.
No. I agree on that. No, that is a concern for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, the connectivity on that side, on one hand, it's like the idea of putting the higher buildings against the foothills of the rim is like, that's kind of why that area works so well, because it's not gonna block anybody's views. But you're right, like the accessibility is a problem.
and we are a town where people have, oh, you know, like my Jeep, you know, that's gonna be, people here have toys. I'm just kind of like,
Well,
That's my
and again, these units are going to be 100% restricted for very low to low income households. So I don't know if they're
I
gonna.
know low income people have a Jeep.
I mean, like, you know, I'm thinking about all the really fancy.
Most of the low income people have a Jeep, guys. Come on now.
Yeah, I just, you know, I commute around on a bike, and I mean, I've been riding, you know, bikes at a high level, whatever.
Mm.
And I'm scared of riding bikes in this town. It's only gotten worse.
Especially on the highway.
And I'm just kind of like, that's a far walk to like walk downtown. Like you're talking like 20-minute, half-hour walk.
Mhm.
And if it was more downtown, this is my only hesitation with this. And I'm like, throw it back on the developers. You gotta like underground parking garages. I don't know. That's kind of my 2 cents on it. Sorry.
The bike path issue is one that should be addressed at some point to your point.
Yeah.
That'd make that a lot more practical and
Yeah, just needs to be made a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grand County Act of Transportation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for the reduced parking. I feel like there's a lot of unused parking that happens in a lot of developments. You know, when I drive by Cinema Court, I've been paying attention, like when I drive by in the evening and stuff, like, how many cars are parked there, how many open spots do it seem like there is and stuff, and like, I'd be really curious what your research says about kind of other places, also about like success or not, but.
I go to like Bonita Street and like, go try to park there, like, a couple of my friends there, I can't park. I'm like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah,
So this is like an example of, you know, was Cinema Court playing with ample parking and Bonita wasn't, you know, like, and they're two
it's
side
also
by
very,
side.
voting is a very different type of development than this would be, though,
Exactly. Exactly.
so.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what you find on other communities that have made this work.
Yeah,
Yeah, and in those communities too, I mean, you can bike here, I feel safely, you know, looking at a community in, I don't know, bike friendly Austin where it's, you know, warm all year too. It's like, it gets cold here. So,
true. Yeah, okay, all good points, thank you. Helpful.
I'll put in a plug for Eugene, Oregon, which have wonderful bike paths.
yeah.
Yeah, it just takes them, yeah, it just takes prioritizing it.
Yeah. And if we need to build this kind of density, maybe we need to be like putting pressure on putting that kind of infrastructure in.
Yeah.
Cause it's right next to all the public lands.
We
right
certainly
there.
Which one is the
Certainly
egg?
Yeah,
Which one's the chicken?
yeah.
Any more questions? Moving on, yes, we have. At least going to talk about the LUC update, incorporate new water conservation provisions.
Okay, I'm just trying to find my presentation. I have it. Missing.
Under recent maybe?
There it is. Oh, landscape conversion. There we go. Okay. This is just a really brief, kind of a future considerations, just to kind of start the conversation, but we've been talking about this for a couple months now, and WISA, Ben Musselman at WISA had reached out originally and asked if we were gonna want to pursue this, and I looked into it, and so we decided we do want to do this land use code update. So this is kind of the summary of the program that's being put out by the state. So this is just directly from their website. So, you know, in Utah, 60% of residential water use goes towards outdoor irrigation. To encourage the use of water-wise plants and landscape principles, the state is incentivizing the replacement of lawn with water-wise landscaping through Utah Water Savers. So the Division of Water Resources is partnered with these different water conservation districts to increase program awareness and funding. The water districts will operate the landscape incentive program within their areas, and the division will operate throughout the rest of the state. So we would be working with the Utah Division of Water Resources on this. And so landscape rebates will be available in any area of the state that has adopted qualifying landscape ordinances. So this would require us to go ahead and adopt some language in our land use code for development standards. But basically the program, you know, works in these ways. So it incentivizes the incentives are available for residential, commercial, institutional, and industrial properties that currently have living maintained grass. And so this is, so there's two parts here. So like the ordinance would affect new development going forward. So that would restrict the amount of turf that they can put in for residential, commercial development. But then this is kind of the retroactive aspect of it, where people can go ahead and convert their current landscaping to meet these standards, and then they can get a rebate on that. So yeah, the drip irrigation systems are required in converted areas. Plant coverage minimums and grass coverage maximums are within the standards. And then you can't put grass on parking strips, slopes, and in areas less than 8 feet wide. So the basic. Sorry, go
These
ahead.
are strict state requirements.
Mhm. These are recommended for if you were going to go forward with being able to qualify for the rebate program. Yeah,
And if we're gonna adopt the program, we have to do these.
we have to put this in our land use code. Yeah. So, I mean, for current residences, it's voluntary. You can opt into it and just get the rebate. But for new development, they would have to follow these minimum standards. And so they're pretty basic. We probably want to expand on these if we're going to go ahead and take the opportunity to update our code and establish some water conservation measures for new development. And I know that the city is working on, or they might have already passed theirs. I can't remember what stage they're at with their water conservation changes that they've been making, but I will be looking into that and kind of seeing if we can incorporate some of the similar standards that they have so that we're consistent as much as possible. We like to be consistent with the city. So no more than 50% of front and side yard landscaped area in new residential development is lawn. Lawn limitations do not apply to small residential lots less than 250 square feet of landscaped area. And then in new commercial, industrial, institutional, and multifamily, common area landscapes, lawn areas shall not exceed 20% of the total landscaped area outside of active recreation areas. That's just the basic minimum standards.
I'm so excited that we're addressing this. As soon as this program came out of the state, my partner and I were both like, oh, we should do this. And then we were like, oh, wait, but we can't do it in Moab. And so, and Grand County. And so I'm really excited to see this.
So we
Getting brought
will,
up.
hopefully soon, it will be
Overdue.
something we can bring to you all, like maybe even next month, that, you know, as a public hearing, we'll have the draft land use code ready to go.
So the idea is you get a rebate on your water bill, or?
No, it's like you apply, you have to show, like, prove what your existing landscaping is. And then you convert it to the standards that they outline. And then, if you, I don't know exactly how the process goes, but my understanding is you get $150 per every so 100 square feet, however much square feet that they say, I can't remember what it is. But yeah, you get like a check in the mail for doing that.
Basically, to help you offset the cost of making the change.
Right.
Yep.
Hey, Alyssa, could you go back to, I think it was on slide 2. I'm also very excited for this program. They called it Flip the Strip up on the Wasatch Front for a little while because there's a lot more like street front and sidewalk type stuff there. And they have this program's guidelines that basically like no grass, convert it to something other than grass. I would suggest, like, not assigning homework, but there are a lot of ways that this program can end up backfiring. What they saw in Provo and American Fork and Ogden was that, you know, bulb flowers and other like high intensive water consuming plants that aren't grass use a lot of water too.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever works within the Division of Water Rights' rule book, if we can make it that much more site specific for southeastern Utah and the Four Corners region, focusing on native adapted low water use plants. And it's important to note that not every plant that's native here is a good water user. There are a lot of native water consumers. So that's, I love that we're buying into this, but I think, you know, there's a whole gaggle of water use, landscaping, and permaculture type experts out there in Moab. And we could pick any one of them to just like comment on what our community rules might be and make sure that I live in a place just like this where I don't have that much grass, but I still water quite a bit because we've got a lot of water consuming non-grass plants.
Right. That is definitely important to note. Thank you. Yeah, we'll look, I would love to have this very site specific and be incorporating standards that relate to native plants and water, you know, water wise plants species. So yeah, for sure. We'll be looking at that. All right, any other questions or comments about this?
I think my only question is, when would be the most ideal time for us to share like research we've done or things that think would be helpful? Now or later in the process or?
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah, just send me anything.
Okay.
So you're gonna have
Always
to
appreciative.
develop a code.
Yeah, so I think we've looked at our land use code and I think the appropriate place to make these changes would be in Article 6, the development standards. So
Uh-huh.
they would just be, yeah, part of that.
So, I mean, do you, like to Tony's point, are you gonna, I mean, is it like, you can plant, you know, XYZ plants, or is it
Have
gotta be
like a
like?
list of species. That's a
Yeah,
possibility. I feel like there's somewhere else in our code that we already have that list, don't we?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
USU has a ton of resources that you can just point to and
Yeah.
say anything on the USU
I'm
list.
just wondering if you just
Mhm.
could copy somebody else's code that ran into problems like Tony. I don't know.
Right, we wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Not to be, I'm a gardener and like amateur homestead aspirer type. Flipping your lawn into a salsa garden doesn't save any water. And that's a big thing. It's like rad to flip your lawn into a salsa garden, but you'll notice there aren't a whole bunch of like tomatoes and peppers just growing wild here in the desert, right?
True.
It's a big part of the thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead, garden.
that's my
Oh,
perspective.
God.
Yeah.
A lot of cottonwood trees.
Cool, thanks, Lisa.
Okay, and number 4, Lisa. Debrief on the 7th of the future land use plan workshop, commercial uses and next steps.
All right. Let's bring up some of the results from our workshop and some of the materials that we had at the workshop. So what day was that on last week?
Wednesday, right?
Wednesday, we had our, June 7th, future land use plan workshop on commercial uses. And basically, we were asking folks to look at the we have 4 different, just bring these up so I can, while I'm talking. We have 4 different categories, future land use categories for commercial uses. They're the main ones. There's a couple more, but they weren't really that applicable for this exercise. So the first one is, it's actually called neighborhood mixed use in our future land use categories. But zoning code now, the neighborhood commercial, but so
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but your audio cut out, you're on mute, and a bunch of people dropped offline.
there we go. Thank you. We're here now. Thanks, Tony.
All better.
Okay. So anyway, what I was describing are these 4 land use categories. So the previous one was neighborhood commercial mixed use. And then we had, of course, our highway commercial, which we currently have is the most commercial zoning that we have in our zoning districts. And obviously, these are types of commercial operations that are oriented towards automobiles and just highway access. And then we have our resort commercial, which encompasses all of the kind of OAO districts and anywhere where there's tourist kind of amenities and hotels. And then light medium industrial is another future land use designation that has been identified. And this would be allowing things like maker workspace, light manufacturing, woodworking, these kinds of things where it's like equipment rental. And so that kind of uses, and we don't have a ton of industrial area or light industrial areas zoned right now in our current zoning map either. So we asked participants to, the first part of this exercise was to actually go through. So we had everybody look at a blank map that had commercial zoning districts on there and the current ones. And then we had little cups at the different nodes, the emerging commercial nodes. There, I think were 5 different areas that you could put uses into. And everybody had a sheet of paper that had all of these different business types on listed on there. Was like probably 25 different business examples, like a coffee shop, a salon, you know, all the different intensities. So everything from light industrial to highway commercial to neighborhood commercial, and they weren't labeled in any color or anything. So we just kind of let people not be thinking about these categories so much, but be thinking more about the actual business type. And then they were able to put in the cup where they thought they would like to see these things or where they thought they would be appropriate. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting,
I loved it.
yeah, I think people were pretty engaged.
And you actually had 2 of each of those.
Right. we
There were
did.
2 coffee shops you could put in different places.
Yes, yeah, yep. Yeah, and we had, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 people. maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It wasn't the best turnout, but we had some really quality feedback overall. So I was really happy.
It
We
was
have-
the sketchy weather for sure.
Yeah, there was a little bit of the weather was a little bit not great, but it turned out to be fine.
It was windy.
2 hours.
I think this is the results of the map. Yeah, this is, so the other part of the exercise was people were able to go to a different blank map and just use these little color-coded flags to pin their pins, that they could put the pins anywhere on the map. And this is the cumulative results of that exercise. So you had a lot of people really gravitating towards the neighborhood commercial idea and actually putting some of that kind of out here along Murphy Lane, which was interesting, but definitely clustered around Spanish Trail, out at the golf course, and then definitely up here in Mill Creek. We saw a lot more of that too. And then there was quite a bit of, let's see, the resort commercial, which I thought was gonna be a not very popular use to put on the map, but people were placing that in different areas. And then light industrial was also used kind of sparingly, but I like this area up here next to off of Sand Flats. Was that you, Aaron? Yeah. There's some good input. And then I think what we talked about doing is actually putting out this exercise in our hallway or next to our office, so we can let people know and just advertise. People could come in and just put their pins in the map or give us their input, because I just feel like we still need a lot more participation in this. And I don't feel like we've gotten enough of the people that might oppose some of the ideas or have very different views. I feel like we're getting a lot of the same kind of views.
Is it possible to do that online?
We can do it online too, and we,
That would
yep, and we've done that
might get a lot of
before.
people.
Yeah, we did open up our last mapping exercise, we had it online, and we got initially some results, but then it kind of petered out, and so I think we'll do both. I think we'll put it up online, and then we'll also give people the option to come in person.
I think that'll be popular. I talked to actually a decent amount of people that are living in Spanish Valley that were like, oh, I had something else I just like couldn't miss to be
Yeah.
there. And so they were really sad and wanted to contribute,
Yeah,
but they
okay,
couldn't. So
great. Yeah, so I think this week we were gonna kind of work on creating a revised draft future land use map and kind of taking everything that we've gotten so far and creating like maybe more of a final version of the future land use map. And then having that up in our hallway, as well as the two exercises where you could do one for commercial and one for residential. And then we'll kind of try to get as many folks, get as much participation as we can in input, and then kind of wrap it up with I think we'll do one more at least steering committee meeting and try to get things finalized. But I have a lot of work to do to get into the actual land use chapter of the general plan to revise all of that language to match up with what this is all looking like. So that's gonna be a whole nother part of it. I think that's all I have. Did I miss anything about the future land use plan
I
workshop?
just have a thought on that. You might be thinking of this already. I just kind of had this like worst case scenario type thing. If you have it in person, I wonder if maybe having like a sign in.
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
And
I
we
could
were
see
gonna
someone
actually-
really energetic and skewing results.
Oh,
by-
for sure. Or like,
multiple.
oh, somebody put that on my parcel, I'm taking it out, you know?
Yeah, right.
Like moving
Yeah.
things around. And so we thought about that, and
Okay.
we thought, well, we'll just have it in, that part of it will be in our, or that map will be in our office, and we can just have people, you know, we'll work with them, like, so that they're not just out on their own in the hallway.
And periodically, you just clear your throat while they're in there. I feel like in their heads. You know, they're
Yeah.
being watched.
thanks for all your work on this.
Yeah,
Yeah, a couple of the exercises that I just like loved, the kind of trying to get different ways of envisioning it for
Yeah.
people so that they could kind of think about it in different ways. I
right?
think a lot of this is really hard for people to conceptualize sometimes, so I
No,
was really
it
stoked
is.
on.
And we've been learning along the way too, how to try to, like, how to make it more understandable, because I think in the first few workshops, maybe we realized it was too much information and everybody was like overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
The cups and the flags were just like
Yeah,
so good, yeah.
yeah, so thank you. And thank you to my staff too, because they're coming up with a lot of these.
Totally, yeah, all of you did really great. Yeah, it was not just a.
All right, and thank you guys for coming to the workshop the other night. That was great. I think I'm done with that.
So it's a little early, but citizens to be heard, and then maybe I'll do it also at 6 o'clock, closer to it if anybody wants to be heard then. So are there any citizens to be heard now? Topic's not on the agenda coming up here. I'm guessing not. Okay, so we're gonna go into a public hearing. It's a public hearing to make recommendations on an ordinance to amend the Luke section 4.4 PUD overlay to include density bonus for deed restricted workforce housing. And I think our procedure is to have Elisa kind of report on this so that people can understand it, then have citizen input, and then we'll be discussing it ourselves.
Great, okay. So this has been on the docket for a land use code amendment for ever since, I think, mid 2022, when we were starting to get some narrowing down on what different strategies we could implement to incentivize affordable housing or require affordable housing, basically just increase the stock of affordable housing or attainable housing. And so one of the ideas was to really take a hard look at our plan unit development section, where we do have an existing density bonus incentive for affordable housing, but it just never is opted into by developers. It never seems to be something that's attractive and probably just doesn't pencil out. And then the other aspect of this is that we only have that incentive for income restricted housing, the affordable housing. That's has, the housing needs to be restricted in accordance with section 6.14, which is our affordable housing section in the code, but we don't have anything that incentivizes workforce housing, of course, other than the HGHO. So this would be another way that we could incentivize deed restricted housing along the lines of the HGHO, but in a different way. And so since we were in this section, we went ahead and kind of tried to up the numbers a little in the affordable housing incentive. And I also created a couple more columns in the table so that we could understand what was actually being increased. So there's a unit increase and then there's a percent increase. And the original, we'll just pull up the spreadsheet here. The original incentive wasn't much different than what is in here. But it just kind of tweaks it a little bit with the idea that maybe this would be slightly more workable. There's also the possibility that we want to try and change it drastically. So this will show you the differences. There. This is what we have in the land use code right now. So you can kind of see out here to the right, I did a little bit of calculation to show what the units we would actually be getting out of each of these density incentives or density bonus incentives. So, for this one, thought residential, you'd end up actually not getting any affordable units out of the whole thing, all said and done. This is the one that I created that's slightly different for the affordable housing incentive. It just ups the numbers just slightly, but maybe it's just enough. And then the workforce housing incentive, this would be brand new. And see, I was adjusting the numbers in here slightly. No, I think they're the same. Yeah, so you would get, like, for instance, if you had multifamily 8, which would have very few of those zones existing right now. But if you did have that and you opted into this workforce housing incentive, you could get up to, let's see, 14 for the incentive 1 or 16 units for the incentive 2. And that would produce 3 or 4 deed restricted units respectively. But if your acreage is like, say if you have 5 acres, that can multiply these, that could increase these numbers quite a bit. So it just depends on how much land is being, part of the calculation for, and usually with a PUD, you're working with a lot larger tracts of land and subdividing down into, kind of a larger development. So the numbers will start to add up if you have, large tracts of land that you're working with here. So that's the gist of this land use code update. There's really not a lot more that we did to this section in terms of any amendments.
The question I have is a rationale for the numbers, the way they exist. So I kind of looked at the affordable housing part and said, well, yeah, you've tweaked them a little bit to make them maybe more generous.
Right,
Because nobody's doing that.
yeah.
And so tell me about deciding on the workforce housing numbers that actually exist, which I guess are a little bit lower than the affordable housing numbers, is that right?
Mhm.
Put that over, which I can I can understand it may be harder to meet the affordable housing standards and the active employed household
Right, that's exactly.
standards.
Yep.
But were you able to use, what was the study, Nexus study we used?
I did look at that, yep, I was basing it on some of their data and the workforce housing needs that they provided in that study. And then I was just kind of really just plugging in numbers and seeing how the actual workforce housing units came out, like how many we would actually get, and kind of just seeing what was reasonable for that. And yeah, not trying not to deviate too far from what the original affordable housing incentive was, but being within the kind of thinking about the difference between what it would take for a developer to make the project pencil out for affordable housing versus workforce housing. So.
And then I guess a question that some people will ask probably is, of course, you might get an overestimate of what the bonuses should be. Have you passed this by any developers?
We have not.
I'm not
well,
sure that's the best thing to do, but
you
I'm
know,
just asking.
There is a project right now, Christina is the representative for the applicant, and they are looking at utilizing this. So I would say there is at least one developer that has had some input on this, so yeah. And I don't know if Christina would wanna, I don't know if we should do that right now, if we wanna wait till the public hearing's over. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, the answer to that is this is kind of, we're trying to move things along, and so I have had at least one developer look at it, but that's
They're looking at the affordable incentive or the workhouse?
the workforce housing. Yeah,
Yeah, because I could see, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to up the affordable housing as compared to workforce, because obviously the workforce is more profitable, so given the choice between the two,
yes.
obviously, you know, money's
would
everything in the
opt.
world of development, so.
Right,
Who would the administrative burden fall on for assessing qualifications for income or AEH?
oh, it would probably fall on the HASU.
Yeah, I think, I can't imagine this would create an overwhelming number of applicants if they've been
Right.
looped in. I don't know what their capacity is. as an
HASU,
organization.
yeah, I mean, we've had discussions with them about all of these programs that are kind of coming down the pipeline in terms of wanting to increase deed restricted housing, and that's going to create this major burden, administrative burden on them most likely, and that there will have to be a conversation at some point of like, is the county going to help fund another position, or how are they gonna, how are we gonna support that administratively? For sure, it's gonna be something to figure out.
Sure.
They were also working on were they also working on some sort of software to help them manage it a little bit, with a little bit less labor?
Yep, exactly. That's very true. Yeah. And Laura has stated recently that she thinks that that's gonna help streamline their process like immensely. So, yeah.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, I guess we go to citizens who want to comment on this project at this point.
Do we open the public hearing? Or-
Oh, I thought I was opening the public hearing. I should have
I don't know,
opened the public hearing when I kind of introduced it, but I should have said we are opening the public hearing. So now, I guess we're ready to have citizen input. Anybody here to speak on this?
They just
No,
wanted to
yes,
listen.
is that right?
Did we
If
get?
you want to speak up, just unmute and go ahead and speak up in case we don't see you. Okay. I guess we're ready for our own discussion of this.
Do we need a motion in order to have a discussion? I can't remember.
I just didn't get it.
Yep.
Did I didn't
Probably.
get this in the packet. I'm
Really?
sorry. Well, no, I got it in this one, but just not in the email one. This one's kind of
Oh,
hitting me on the side there. So I just had a couple clarifications. we're basically adding the workforce housing as an AEH
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
And then the affordable housing, can you just kind of break down what that is?
That's always been in there, and that, the only thing that we're doing to that is just changing the numbers a little bit to see if it would help some, a developer actually utilize it.
Yeah,
But it's always been based on, it's tied to our affordable housing section 6.14, which has, it's based on, I think 6.14 defines affordable housing as housing that costs less than 30% of your, your housing costs are 30% of your total income or something like that, or costs, I can't remember what the language is. But it's in the,
And that top table is how it is currently, and the second table is how you're proposing potentially amending
Yeah.
it. Okay.
My way of looking at it was, you kind of tweaked a little bit, the affordable housing part and the AEH part is
brand new.
new.
Mhm.
And you're right, if we're gonna have, we should have a motion on the floor if we're going to discuss it at any length.
I guess the objective here, to Aaron's point, is to improve the economics from a construction or a building standpoint so that we get better participation from the building community. All right. So,
So do we have a motion?
There's not a recommended motion on the,
Oh,
Yes.
on the sheet, so I'm not
yeah.
confident enough to.
Sorry about that, you guys.
That's okay.
I would say it could be something like along the lines of, I move to send a favorable or unfavorable recommendation to the county commission to approve the planned unit development land use code amendment for workforce housing incentive. Or just the title of
The title.
the title, yeah, in the agenda summary, which is the ordinance to amend land use code section 4.4 PUD overlay to include density bonus.
Okay. In that case, a motion to send a favorable recommendation for the ordinance to amend LUC section 4.4 PUD overlay to include density bonus for deed restricted workforce housing.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion.
Guess I'm curious how much can we push the affordable housing incentive while we're amending it?
Right.
How much can we push on that
I mean,
without?
yeah, see that this is where if we could get some developer input, I think that would be very helpful for the affordable housing incentive. Yeah.
It's pretty hard to get.
I mean, we can do that. It doesn't have to be set in stone. This could be a minor tweak that we could do now, and then we could always go back and update it again. And, with more information maybe
Yeah.
from developers.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because we desperately need affordable housing. We desperately also need workforce housing, but affordable housing is desperately needed. So I'm just thinking about like how aggressive we can get with
Yeah.
the bonuses for that to make it actually something that, a developer would consider.
Well, and so if you look at one of the kinds of lines of logic that I was thinking about was our MFR 8 it's conventional, the density right now for that is 8 units per acre. So if you're going up to 15 units per acre, that's quite a big jump, right? And so I feel like these numbers are kind of important.
Although to Steve's point, the economics for the developers would be much better with MFR anyway, right? So, and those increases are significant,
Yeah,
very significant.
very significant, right? And so when you're going from 5 units per acre up to 8 units per acre, you're impacting, there's the impact to the neighborhood, that whole
Yeah.
thing. And so I think there's just like kind of a threshold there where we have to kind of be reasonable with how much we're increasing the density. I think the PUD
I-
is definitely like a unique scenario that developers are gonna be utilizing this overlay district. It's not always gonna be the case, and I think where we're gonna get more of our affordable housing is probably through the MF 45 overlay district and the other multifamily zoning districts that we will soon adopt as part of the future land use plan. Those are all coming down the pipeline, you know, so at various levels, 35 units per acre, 18 units per acre.
And I think Tony wants to say something
Yes,
too.
go ahead, Tony.
I'm going to be a little bit uncharacteristically subjective and share like a personal opinion on it and the way I approach these kinds of things. I feel like, to Makeda's point, this is a bit of a negotiation with what's the number going to end up as. And the developers will always prefer a higher profit, and that's always going to be less affordable housing. And sitting around a poker table having a negotiation, I say ante high, you know, and I liked what you said, Alyssa. It's not like we can't amend an ordinance a second time or a third time. But if this is a public hearing and we're here to discuss getting the most affordable possible housing out into the community, let's, you know, go for it, is what I'm thinking. And maybe maybe a developer didn't get to weigh in, and this isn't going to pencil out. It's the fourth time we've talked about penciling out this evening. You know what? Let them tell us that. Not too many developers, public comments have been quiet all night. So, you know, send it as it is what I say.
Thank you.
Lisa, can you clarify this note under, I think, the second graph on page 23 of the packet under 4.4.9?
Yeah, so that's just kind of referencing the text just at the very beginning here, where it says,
Sorry, what, the beginning where?
so right under here, workforce
Okay.
housing density bonus incentives. So it's just kind of reiterating what it says up here, which is that, you know, at least 50% of the bonus dwelling units provided in density incentive 1 and 80% of the bonus density units provided in density incentive 2 shall be restricted for ownership and occupancy by actively employed households as defined in section 4.7.3. And so that's just reiterated down here. And it was just that, it was that way for the affordable housing section. So I just mirrored that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I might advocate for striking both notes there.
Yeah, that
It's
note
just
is
kind of redundant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I think it, to me,
actually, that note above says 70% and one below is 80. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So the workforce housing one is 50 and 80, and then the affordable housing is
70.
50 and 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
and then that other note is attached to that other graph.
Oh, right. Yeah, that note just above there is supposed to go underneath the graph for the affordable housing. Which just got kind of moved down. But yeah.
Yeah, because as I read that, I thought I understood that, and then I read it, and I read it again, and I found myself second guessing and going
Yeah.
back and forth, and
Okay.
now it's just late in the afternoon and evening,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's even there. It's kind of redundant. We can definitely strike it.
I mean, my take on it is, yeah, I like the spirit of it. This has been here, it hasn't been utilized. Let's reassess, make some changes. You know, we haven't gotten any comment tonight, so really, we have no idea. I'd say I'm a fan of just continuing to push this forward as it goes. You know, planning commission, you get a little interest, right? Then when things go to public hearing with the county commission, you generate more interest. And I think maybe also if there's some reach out or put it out to developers to solicit more actively
Right.
some input.
Yeah, between.
Because
now and
we are in summer, you know, things kind of,
Yeah.
not everybody is as active at looking at agendas as I wish they were, but.
Right, yeah, I will reach out to some developers, though. It'd be great to have some feedback from them before it goes to commission.
Any other comments?
No.
Okay, I guess we are ready to then vote on this. How many people are in favor of, and I'm going to have trouble with the motion, but sending a positive motion on the ordinance to amend the LUC section 4.4 PUD overlay to include a density bonus for deed restricted for workforce housing. It's unanimous. And with that, I'm going to close this public hearing.
Tony, you want to say something or you just have?
Go ahead.
That chat, the hand was my vote, but it should also be noted, I heard someone say, Christina Sloan left comment in the chat box before the voting had concluded.
Okay.
So we should, maybe we can retroactively address that chat. I don't think it is substantive enough to affect the voting, at least not for me.
What does it
Yeah,
say?
so she's saying, I can weigh in on my developer client's position on the proposed update. If helpful, bottom line is that developer wants to build, I can't see what it says there, out 25% of their subdivision with workforce housing, and the proposed incentives under the workforce housing updates pencil for them. So she's basically giving the thumbs up that for their side of things, it would work out.
Okay, don't want to nag, but how do we find out what would pencil out to build affordable housing for this situation?
Staring at spreadsheets for a long time.
Yeah, I
Right.
hear pencil out a lot, but give me a measurable figure. What is pencil out?
Yeah, I mean, so
Like,
here's
what's
the
the
thing,
profitability?
the BAE consultants were going to work on an actual effort where they were gonna have. They did this in the last study. They were gonna actually work with developers and test out a few different scenarios.
Yeah.
And it was gonna be in relation to the multifamily districts and the incentives that we're gonna provide to the future land use map. But this could be tied into that
Yeah.
as well. So I think that when we get to that point,
Okay,
we can have them look at this and just plug it into what they're doing for the other stuff and see if we can get some feedback that way.
yeah, I think it'd be important to maybe sort of prioritize that, because workforce housing is awesome,
Yeah,
but
yeah. no,
people
I-
that can, yeah, people in our workforce that can afford the houses that are being built for workforce housing are not generally the people working in our restaurants and all of our, like, everything that's like actually
Yeah.
our town needs to like really function.
Absolutely.
And that's not a popular opinion, but yeah, yeah, I would just like to, I don't know, figure out more radical ways to try and like target that demographic.
I agree. I totally agree with you.
So
I kind of missed. Do you mind just saying that again? I think I missed it and I want to hear what you have to say.
So developers are building workforce housing under these density bonuses or under HDHO, all this stuff, right? But the workforce housing is being built, your general person in like any of them, like, oh my God, what's the word?
Service
Service entry, or what's the,
Service,
when we had
seasonal.
COVID, where it was like,
Oh.
Essential.
There we go, essential workers. Our essential
yes.
workers and our
Absolutely.
service industry people realistically can't afford 600 feet, $600 a square foot. But that's just not
Right.
how that's gonna go down. Like,
Right.
nobody I know can afford these things. So,
Yeah. That segment of the
those are
community
awesome
that's not going to
and
be.
important.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
gonna be qualifying for HDHO necessarily
Yeah.
because their income wouldn't be as high.
Yeah,
But that.
Which it wasn't meant to target them. I
Right.
totally get that.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're getting at, and we can definitely, I think we can push for that more through this. But there are other ways we're doing it too, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm gonna do one more thing, Tony too. So we've now read this chat thing. Everybody comfortable with their previous vote? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, just for the record. Future considerations. Do we have any?
Yes, I have a couple of them. At one of our workshops with the ADU development, Rarnie Schultz was talking about how putting deed restrictions on ADUs kind of alters the game when you kind of have, when you have to do lendability.
So I want to clarify that the county has a different deed restriction than the city does for ADUs.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's still a restriction.
But it's not anything related to, the only thing that it does is it just says you can't use your ADU as a nightly rental.
Right,
As you have to have it occupied for more than 30 days or 60 days or something.
right.
And then,
But it says,
That's
I was just reading, it's like oh man, I just had it up. It says like the occupier has to be on site.
oh, the
The owner has,
the owner of there has to be, one of the residences has to be owner occupied.
I've just come up with,
Primary or we've talked about changing that in our code.
right, I've worked with a lot of people and, I'm always talking stuff with property owners that live here. I've come across this more than like a couple times where people are like, they have a second home, totally, whatever. But they've been like, I would like to build an ADU, but like, I can't. And they're like, so the house sits empty. Instead of being like, well, we'd rather rent out the front and then come and visit in the back. And so.
Yeah, man, but they can afford to have a house sit empty, all right? So whatever. Right?
Yeah,
Right,
right.
okay.
Right, so I've just had that discussion with people about that being an issue. And also, like, if it interferes with the lendability, by having any, like, I guess, what Ronnie was saying is like, you put that on there and then it's like, oh, wait, there's a deed restriction, we gotta like, look at it differently. I'm just kind of like, build housing, it's more housing stock. If that place gets sold, that's potential, more housing. I'm just wondering if that's like prevents people from building ADUs. We don't seem to have that many of them being
It
built.
doesn't seem to prevent them from renting the empty house, right?
Yeah,
Right.
but I don't get what is your argument against it.
You were saying that you've got like a second homeowner that'd like to build an ADU, live in the ADU and rent the house. But
Right,
if the house is sitting empty, why don't they just rent the house?
because they don't want to. They want to
Right.
retain that for their own private use. So now we have a potential ADU that's not built.
Well, we have a
So-
potential house that's not rented already.
Right,
But that's not in our control though. So I see what you're saying.
right. I'm like, wouldn't it be better to get an ADU than not an ADU going for housing?
What you're
I
saying,
think it's a hat on a hat.
I think what you're arguing for is that additional ADUs would increase the amount of available housing in the community.
Yeah,
And so why not work to make more? I get
right.
that.
And I think having a deed restriction, if that lowers the value of the place, maybe I'm like already facing high construction costs. I live in the city, not in the county. And if it's like, oh, it's already this, oh, if I put $100 into it, and if it wasn't deed restricted, it'd be worth, 150. And if it doesn't have that, well, it's worth 120 of an investment kind of mindset. Is that, are people, I've heard feedback from several people that I've just randomly like done work for that are like, yeah, this is a consideration. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, where are we at with that? I mean,
And for the record, I think your math is absolutely accurate. I'm not arguing with the point
Yeah.
that would increase housing. I think I found a better way to frame my point is that that would increase housing. It would not increase like mean resident equity or liquidity, and it wouldn't be as much community building, right? It wouldn't like necessarily empower residents. We would just have more landlords.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
But I
You
guess.
know, I know we talked about it when we were doing that ADU section update. We had a little conversation going about, should we leave it in there to require the primary residency for one of the units, or do we need to really worry about that? Should we just take it out? And I think we ended on leaving it in there, but there was definitely interest in maybe looking at taking it out.
Yeah.
And that section never went through the full update or the full approval for adopting it. So we do want to bring that back around, and we could look at
right.
So
I'm definitely into like, seeing if the commission has any, like, is that an interest to them? I understand like the land, like creating more landlords, but we're talking about making MFR 45 and MFR 8, like boosting the density. That's making more landlords too. I see people like, how about the person that's like in Spanish Valley that lives here, that's like, well, if I build this, could I sell it? And well, maybe it would have, like, I sell it to an out of towner, now they can't benefit from it. So does that skew the value? And so people are like, maybe I won't touch it because there's too many weird things in it. I'm definitely not into, necessarily fueling landlord, overlord, things, but at the same time, there's a real just build housing,
Yeah.
kind of thing, and hopefully it collapses the market. I mean, I should, wait, I didn't. Did I say that? Lowers the market down to acceptable levels, so.
I'll only speak a little bit, not on this particular topic, but we've seen pieces of what just built for the market does. I mean, it certainly built us a lot of hotels and a lot of second homes. So I'll speak in favor of regulation in many places. That's not talking on just this topic, though.
And we have
Market-
regulation on
market
big
won't take
things.
care
This
of
is more of a small, I feel like, I don't know, this is like
Yeah.
more small guy stuff. We're always
Yeah.
regulating the small guy. Like, well, yeah, regulate the big projects. I don't.
Tony, I'd like to clarify something that you were talking about. So are you thinking that more ADUs would not have a substantial impact on the rental market in general? And by substantial impact, I mean
No, I think,
lower rate.
sorry, you cut out there. I think we had crossed mics. What was that last part, Jerry?
Yeah, what I meant by impacting the rental market is maintain rents at a lower rate. Basically, more affordable rental housing.
Right, but my argument is not numeric. It's a little bit emotional, and I'm gonna have to own that. But if people sincerely cared about the housing market, then this second home that they would love to build an ADU in the back of and rent would be occupied. I'm talking about earnestness and sincerity and exactly how much they think they're going to get for their rental per square foot, right? Like and not just talking about increasing inventory. I'm talking about increasing affordable inventory that lends itself to the like intergenerational financial equity of our residents, right? So that's a scary thing for the retired folks to hear. But this is what we are gonna need if we want to turn ourselves away from Telluride.
That's a hard thing to do really in any market.
Yes, of course it is. I'm the perpetual idealist.
I guess the other thing I was thinking about with the ADUs is as that university grows in size, which I think it would, an ADU might be a really good place for students to go and rent, and they're not looking at for a place long-term, right? So,
Yeah.
and I guess if we can, find suitable places for more of them, that's less pressure they put on the other rentals.
Yeah, I've lived in some illegal ADUs in this community before, and I got to tell you, like 5-gallon buckets and ice cubes, and it's like not, it is
Yeah.
not what you guys think it is.
Yeah.
Been to my house.
Also seems like we're theorizing a lot around whether or not blendability is affected by this particular deed restriction.
Yeah, I think there was some confusion kind of created when Barney spoke up about that a little bit.
Would it be appropriate for me to reach out to Ronnie and clarify, or is that something that you'd rather do through your
You want to do
office?
that?
Okay,
That
that'd be
would
helpful.
great.
Okay,
That's
I don't
always
want to
helpful.
overstep, so.
Yeah,
but
no, I think.
I have to talk to her about my own stuff anyway.
Perfect, because I know she might have been referring more to the city's deed
Mhm.
restriction, because they do have theirs is actually complicated, because in different zones, their ADUs are restricted for AEH, I believe. or
They have
something
3
along those
zones.
lines. Yeah, so I think they do have maybe an issue where it could be a little harder.
And I'll be honest, one of the reasons why I haven't built an ADU is exactly that. It's like, let's say I built a $100,000 ADU, I try to sell it. Somebody's like, well, I couldn't rent it.
You can't sell any.
No, no,
Oh,
my
you mean
house.
at your
Let's say I
house. Oh.
sold my house, put on the market,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
somebody's like, oh, I can't buy that because I'm an out of towner. So what? But like, I can't buy that and do that because it's restricted,
Right.
kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, that just lowered the value for me, who's a resident that's hopefully owns my place for a long time.
Yeah.
It fits in my calculation of like, whether or not to pull the trigger on it or not.
But
Well,
with this.
looking at making $100,000 investment, and you wanna know you're gonna get your money out of it at some. point.
Yeah, I'm like, well, should I just wait till the city, push that to the city repeals that or what? So,
But
I
I
know
know the
it-
county, what you're saying, like, the only alternative to our thing would be then opening it up so people could do it for overnight rentals, and then it would make the investment worth it, right?
no overnight rentals. It's just, it falls as all our other housing. You can't rent it short term. It has to be, like everything else. Yeah, no overnight rentals. I'm not proposing.
Right.
I'm like,
Our deed restriction, our current rules around ADUs, the main thing that's restrictive is that one of the unit, either the primary unit or the secondary unit has to be occupied by the owner.
we've only had, 14 applications last year? So it's not like people are like knocking down the,
Yeah.
I'm just like, if we could get 2 more this year, I don't know.
I hear you.
And then you do, it hasn't been overly popular. I should do two more things, actually. One is, if there are any citizens to be heard and want to be heard at this late time, I'm inviting that. I'm guessing no. And then somebody put down here strategies to implement the proactive code enforcement.
Yeah, that was just this is kind of a continuing effort that we're aware that the commission does probably, I know that there's kind of a intent to go forward with more proactive code enforcement. Specifically, what we know right now is that needs to happen, and it could happen along the lines of enforcing illegal nightly rentals. And that's been something that we were working on with Josh and the Economic Development Department to get new software in order to do that more easily. We didn't realize that we actually still, or I guess the Economic Development Department didn't realize that they still had the software from a long time ago and it was still activated. So we just found out that we have all this data that we can retrieve. And so we're not waiting anymore. We're gonna go ahead and start like getting the list of all of the, because they crawl the web for all the different advertisements that are out there for overnight rentals, and then compare that with the business licenses, and then kind of start to, send out letters and do the enforcement process more
There's the time
effectively.
regulation.
Yeah.
Alyssa, for my curiosity, just because I'm in this at work right now, what's the name of that software program called?
It's
You can text
host
me.
compliance. Oh, okay.
Lines, their stock just went
So
up.
they just realized it's.
But so it's actually gonna work out okay. We have all this data, we can retrieve it, and then we're still gonna be looking at, I guess, the original idea with, because EDD, they use this same data set for their TRT tracking, so they need it as well, and they might have different needs. for it, and there's possibility that a different software might be better. So we're still kind of looking into these other programs that we might contract with next time around, but after this one is expired. So anyway, that's good news. And in terms of active enforcement for other types of things, we're just kind of in conversation with admin and kind of the commission leadership to figure out what they really want to be doing on that front and kind of directing us. Because I think Josh has been a little bit leery of, actively enforcing certain things, especially when it comes to like long-term camping and the kind of implications for that. So, yeah, but the discussion is ongoing.
Well, good news.
Yeah.
Very good. I guess we're at that time.
I have one more other future considerations. When we were doing the ADO, I was really green and kind of was like learning things. I was surprised when the ADO went through to see how big there's like a four unit minimum putting on there. Several people that I've talked to are like, I don't want 4, I want 2. I want to use this one to like save up money to build an ADU. I was like, man, that was really what, if I was to envision something on that. I kind of like, can amendments be made to that? What do we think on that?
I don't know, think about it.
I
The
mean, we would
reason
be
why.
getting less
The
density.
reason why we went for that is because the intent of the ADO wasn't to allow RVs and trailers to become accessory dwelling units. Like, that wasn't the intent at all. So it was more about like creating these little pockets of tiny home developments or long-term camp parks, like actual community development type things, not just like little pieces of little like accessory dwellings.
Right.
Yeah, in people's
Yeah.
backyards. kind of.
Well, it's just funny, there's this one that's coming up and he's like, I only want 2, but he's gonna pay for, you'd be willing to pay for 4 to get 2. And it's like, oh, well, I can't, yeah, he doesn't want all that, he just wants 2 spots. It's like, so is that, no, not,
There was a lot of public feedback. too.
Aaron, my
That was like-
question was, sorry, Makeda, go ahead.
There's a lot of public feedback from people that were like, we don't want this just like sprinkled across the whole
Right,
valley. And so
right.
it's part of trying to placate those people,
Yeah.
right,
try to find a nice balance. Yeah.
Mhm.
Aaron, I would tell the guy you were talking to, like, have him find 2 friends. Jeez,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he can do it.
Right, yeah, it's just, when that went through, I was a little I guess I wanted to see it in another direction than where it went, so, okay. Anyways, that was my other thing that I wanted to throw by everybody.
At least in general, you put things like that, water conservation change on a calendar, right? And work on it over time.
Mhm.
Is that the next step for that?
I guess my goal with that one was to try to bring a draft or a red line version of that section of the code that we're replacing those standards to you all at the next meeting. Either we could just have that to review, or if we feel like it's an urgent thing, we could just go ahead and have the public hearing and make comments on the language during that public hearing. But I would definitely want to bring it to the next meeting in some form.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just wanted to see it keep moving.
yeah, for sure.
Any motion to end the meeting?
A motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?